Thank you. It is a very high pleasure for me to be here today. My name is Abelardo Pardo, and as I have been introduced, I come from Australia, the University of South Australia. The purpose of the talk today is to cover two topics that are very relevant to the area of learning analytics. But before I start discussing the topics, I'd like to give you a bit of an introduction of the research group that I'm part of at the University of South Australia. I am a member of the C3L research group, and it's a group that has a mission that I think it connects with most of the things that have been discussed so far, which is trying to understand this human and artificial cognition interaction. That's part of our mission. But we also have a very practical and application impact. Therefore, we are sitting, I think, at the space that is connecting with most of the things that have been presented today. The other thing that I'd like to convey to you is the existence, for those of you that don't know it, of the Society of Learning Analytics Research, of which I am the president. This is an international society that has been very active in this field, and the main purpose of it is to bring together the community of researchers and practitioners. It is a very diverse society, as you can see. We currently have 260 individual members, and one of the things that makes us very proud, on top of that, we also have 128 student members. This means that it's a field that is evolving very quickly, and it's a very promising future because we have a lot of students. We're also very happy to be representing, or to have representatives from 27 countries, and the society has one special type of membership we call institutional membership, and currently we have 16 universities all around the world. These are the current institutional members, and I am very happy and very proud to announce that University of Kyoto has joined an institutional member. Thank you very much. And as you can see, we have a very wide representation from Australia, United States, Singapore, New Zealand, Germany, Netherlands, United Kingdom, and Canada. So this is a society that is very active. This is a society that brings researchers and practitioners from all over the world. As you can see, that representation, it's spread all around the world. There are some areas that need a little bit of outreach. We have a very strong presence in Asia, as you can see. Obviously, a very strong presence in the US as well. But our spirit, our strategy is to try to increase these numbers, to try to welcome you to this society. The society also has a very strong compromise with how do we disseminate research. These are two initiatives we have right now. The Journal of Learning Analytics. It's a journal that is now in its current 4th volume. It's been 5 years that we've been pushing this journal, and it's about to be indexed. We are in the process of having the journal indexed. We also published 2 years ago the Handbook of Learning Analytics, a humongous effort by a lot of the best researchers in the field to put together seminal work, seminal papers for people to understand the field. And the best part is that both of these resources are open content. We have a very strong commitment from the point of view of the society to make sure that we create impact that is available for everyone. The other couple of events that we have planned that I'd like to convey to you is the upcoming Learning Analytics and Knowledge Conference in Frankfurt, which I encourage you to start checking because the deadline will be in September. I'm also very happy to announce that this is the 2020 edition. The 2022 edition of this event will be hosted by the University of Kyoto here in Japan. We're very excited about that. The other type of activities that we host is a doctoral consortium. In this event that I show you here, the Learning Analytics and Knowledge Conference hosts a doctoral consortium. And it's our way to make sure that this number of students are properly advised. We help them. And we get very good feedback from the students that attend this doctoral consortium. They think it's crucial for them to get to know the community, to get to know the researchers, and to get in touch and interaction and feedback from the senior researchers in the group. So this is something that we subsidize with the funds we get from sponsors, but we're getting very good feedback, very good results from that. And another event that is coming up, this is different from the research conference, is the Summer Institute in Vancouver. This is a 3-day event, very intensive with a lot of workshops, practical sessions, keynotes, and it's our way of offering researchers and practitioners the opportunity to train and practice most of the techniques that are in the area. So hopefully I convey to you the structure of the society. We have a lot of interest on connecting with as many researchers as possible. I am very pleased to see the amount of interest that learning analytics is raising in Japan. Also the wide variety of activities and initiatives that have been presented and discussed. It is very refreshing to see this type of interest, and I'd like to extend you an invitation to connect with this society and explore membership, attending the events, participating. I want to talk to you today about 2 things that I thought it would be interesting for this community. The first one, I would like to tell you a little bit of an overview of different initiatives at different layers of learning analytics. When we think about learning analytics and we think about higher institutions, I will present to you 3 layers that sometimes need to be considered differently. The other thing I want to talk to you about is once we try to embrace institutionally and education learning analytics, we struggle with the right structure. We need to think carefully, what is the right institutional structure that would be ideal to deploy learning analytics? And I'll give you 4 examples of structures that we have been observing from the point of view of the society, from Solar Society. So let's start first with learning analytics layers. A few years back, about 7 years ago, my colleague Simon Buckingham-Cham published a report for UNESCO trying to divide the layers of learning analytics into 3 elements. The one at the top is what we call the macro, and that refers to regional initiatives or perhaps state initiatives or perhaps national initiatives at the level of the entire country, like would be Japan. Meso, which is institution-wide, and then micro, which says here individual user actions, but I want you to think about that more at the level of a course or a subject. Okay, so 3 levels. Macro, entire country. Meso, institution. Micro, low level of the institution. So let's start looking at examples in these levels. The first one probably that is simple to understand and is fairly straightforward is at the level of the institution, at the meso level. For each of these examples, what I'm going to show you is what is the problem that is being solved, what are the required resources and structures, very quickly, I cannot get into a lot of details, and most importantly, and this is something that is at the heart of this event, the evidence of success, which is the crucial part. So first example, this is the typical example that is very easy to understand and a lot of institutions have in place. It is at the meso level, and is student retention. And this is my way to represent pictorially what happens in here. Typically, this is a simplification, but it's just to put the problem in context. We have a database of data that is collected from all over the place, and it's very challenging to create this database. From this database, we derive some predictive models from the previous data, some predictive models that tell us if the students are likely or not to abandon the institution. Can we retain those students or not? And that predictive model will tell us if students are at risk of abandoning the institution. And this is an approach that has been put in place in numerous institutions all over the world. The problem here is to create this database. The problem here is also to have a very good predictive model, and there has been some discussion about this previously. But then ultimately, the problem is also what kind of reports and actions are required to prevent students to abandon the institution. So a lot of resources are needed in this structure. A lot of effort is required to create this database. A lot of expertise is required to produce this predictive model. This predictive model has to be good, has to have a good prediction feature. But also, it is very delicate and very challenging to deploy these actions. What is the evidence that we need to verify if this is working? Fairly straightforward. The evidence is when we increase our retention rate. If we have 1 year in which 50 students abandon the institution, and the next year after having our model, the data, the actions, we reduce the number of students that abandon the institution, then we can claim that we have a little bit of evidence that points to that increase in the retention mode. This is the typical scenario for learning analytics. But remember, this is at the meso level. Let's look at other initiatives. Let's look at something that happens at different levels. Let's look at the next scenario. This is at micro. I want you to think now, what would be a competitive and compelling evidence of the use of learning analytics at the level of classroom? And there are quite a lot of research initiatives here in this domain. A bit more complex, this picture, a little bit more of detail, because some things are happening in a learning environment. There is an interaction between instructors and students and the learning environment. We are collecting observations into a database. We have the possibility of analyzing and reporting, and we also have the possibility of predicting behavior. The main difference here is that the objective is not necessarily retention. The objective here is to make sure that the students are engaged and they have a quality of the learning experience. So the structure is very similar. The main difference is that we have this learning environment here. Of course, we have to also consider reports and actions, and in some cases, these reports and these actions may turn into changes in the learning design. But this is at the level of the classroom. You have to think, what is the instructor deciding to do with the data tomorrow? Or what is the algorithm predicting to act tomorrow in a course? And that course has a context, that subject has a context. So it's a very different scenario here, right? The problem is now increased student engagement and attainment. It's no longer retention. We are at the micro level. The resources and structure, this gets very complicated because we need data collection infrastructure that requires technical expertise. We need combining multiple data sources from the LMS, from student registration systems, demographics, even more complex. We also need data management policy. This is an administrative task. Who owns that data in the institution? How do we make it available to the instructors? We also need this predictive model as before. This is expertise from a data scientist. We also need, and this is very delicate, the contextualization of the learning design. The way I deploy this model in a course on pharmacy may be different from the way I deploy it in a course on mathematics. It needs to be contextualized. And this is where things get even more challenging because different courses may require different schemes. We also need, and this is something we've seen in most of the institutions, a clear vision from the leadership of the institution. If you have one or two academics, instructors that are doing this on their own, they won't last. These initiatives will not survive. You need a clear leadership vision that says, our university would like to explore this model to make sure that we gather evidence that we are giving the students the opportunity to engage better with our educational experience, and they're also improving their results. That would be the evidence we get from the micro level, and this is challenging. One of the main challenges comes from the variety of elements here, and I'll get a little bit more into that detail about this. But this is the type of frontier that we need to explore from the very broad level. Okay, micro level. Let's go to the third example. This is between micro and meso. So it's at the level of the institution. It's not retention. It's something a bit more advanced. What I'm proposing here is a scheme by which we now look at all the subjects that the students take over the years. We're not looking inside the subject. We're looking at the program or degree. What would be the most adequate terminology? Degree, probably, right? So we look at the degree. Think of someone that is studying nursing or is studying psychology. That student has to acquire certain competencies. And those competencies get acquired over several years. It's not one course, it's several years. We can collect the evidence. We can put it in the database. And that evidence now has a different purpose. The evidence is tracking the trajectory of how students acquire these competencies and at what level. We may start with all the students having low level of competencies, but over the years, we detect how the students are evolving. The idea of this model is not so much retention. It is not supporting the students in one single course. This is supporting the students throughout their professional trajectory so that they hit the market with the right competencies. And we can collect the data. We can also run predictive models. We can analyze, and we can take some actions that could be provide the students with additional information, resources, suggestions, extra actions that are specifically to target those competencies that they need to graduate. So it's a micro-meso type of initiative. The key element here are the competencies. We need to keep track of this. We need to make sure that we know the type of competencies we are requiring. And at the end of the day, we need to go back to our students and coach them, give them those suggestions. You are in your third year of your degree on psychology. We recommend that you work a little bit more on certain competencies. We recommend you expand in these other competencies. This is something that is data-driven, with certain prediction, and very useful for the students. So this model, or this initiative, the problem switches a little bit. Now it's increasing the student acquisition of professional competencies. It's no longer retention. It's no longer increasing student engagement. The resources and structures we need in here are very similar to the previous ones. The most important, perhaps, is this contextualization of the program or degree by instructors, academic designer, and curriculum advisors. We need to detect where are the competencies being acquired, at what level, what kind of activities are connected, how do we track those activities, what kind of data do we obtain from them, how do we apply the predictive models, and what kind of actions do we derive to talk back to the students. I maintain this line in all the models. This needs to happen with a clear vision from leadership. Do not expect this to appear in your institution automatically. There has to be a specific strategic vision from the leadership telling, this is the way we would like to address this initiative at the micro-meso level. The evidence. The evidence would be very detailed account of the trajectory on how students acquire these competencies. And let me give you a driver, or let me give you a motivation why would you collect this trajectory. There are certain disciplines out there that need to get accredited. Accreditation is very typical in medicine, nursing, engineering. The accrediting bodies would love to see this type of trajectory, this type of evidence, where we can say our students follow these trajectories with the competencies, and we support our students through those years in the program using data. So this is another initiative. Final one, at the macro or national level, and this is something that perhaps would apply here in Japan, and I've heard some initiatives that are already in this space. This would be at the national level. The idea to visualize that is a student that goes from education institution to educational institution, and each educational institution collects data about them, about their performance. Perhaps it's an institution that has the previous model and it's collecting how the competencies are acquired. That student, as soon as he gets into the professional world, maybe goes back to do some additional training. Ideally, learning analytics could help combining these databases and apply the same model we've seen before. Some predictive models, some analysis, some reports, and some actions. These necessarily don't need to be the students, it could be the professionals. But it's pretty much the same pattern that we've seen here. Okay, very quickly now let me talk about the institutional structures. These models are all useful, hopefully. The main challenge is how do you deploy structures within your institution that are conducive to those type of initiatives. What is the number one challenge? All these examples that I've shown before have one common feature. They need a multidisciplinary team. You cannot do it alone with the technologists. You cannot do it alone with data scientists. You cannot rely only on the instructors. It has to be a multidisciplinary effort. And this, from the point of view even of the international society, we have identified is the most difficult barrier to tackle by institutions. So let me tell you then what would be the right structure for this. And let me give you 4 examples. The first one is taken from this publication here at the bottom. It's a publication that appeared a year ago comparing 2 structures of 2 different institutions. The first one is called the Digital Incubation Greenhouse, and it's at the University of Michigan. This is the important structure. The unit that is providing support on learning analytics is this orange box. And as you can see, is directly reporting to an office of academic innovation. So this group in here is inside a structure in the university that has the specific feature of addressing academic innovation. So this would be the element that I was referring to of having a unit that has the clear mandate from the structure that innovation has to happen, and it has to happen in the direction of using learning analytics. This is the unit. Having said that though, the other important thing about this diagram is that it has a lot of connections. Definitely has the connection with the academics. This has to be there, otherwise we will never achieve micro or meso level of initiatives. But the other hand, they also connect with, in this case, the Center for Research on Learning and Teaching. So this institution here in the University of Michigan, it's a combination of research and implementation and deployment. It has a strong component about monetization. It's an incubation greenhouse. There is the possibility of products spinning out of this element. But the ultimate goal is to support academics through the use of learning analytics, informing your design with the connection with the Collaborative Learning Center. So this is option number one. Another structure, this one is in Australia, in the University of Technology, Sydney, and it's run by my colleague Simon Buckingham-Chum, and it's the second structure that appears in this publication. Slightly different, look, the element or the lab or the entity that now is in charge of using learning analytics reports directly to the DVC education. DVC stands for Deputy Vice Chancellor. I think the equivalent here in Japan would be a Vice President. You report directly to the Vice President. You also connect with academics, but in this case, this lab connects a lot with the analytics of business intelligence and the analytics derived from the LMS. And the final element is, this is the equivalent of this previous model, the Center for Research and Learning and Teaching. Here is the University Teaching and Learning Support. This is the unit that is helping maintaining the LMS, making sure the courses are high quality. So this is a very interesting structure where we still localize here the innovation, but a lot of interaction with other elements. The important element to detect here is that it's reporting directly to a Vice President. That gives a very clear mandate. And this element or this unit has a lot of relationship with others. Third example, this is the one I have in my institution at the University of South Australia. Most of the initiatives in the learning analytics space are part of the teaching innovation unit. This teaching innovation unit is providing support all across the university. Our structures are divided in divisions. Divisions have deans, deans have schools, and inside the schools are the academics. This teaching innovation unit provides support across the board, and there is one team that is specialized in learning analytics and is part of this unit. This is the team that not only talks to the academics, provide training initiatives, provide prototypes, runs focus groups, detects what is the next thing that should be deployed. We have a dashboard with course statistics available to every academic. This dashboard is personalized. We have 2 or 3 tools that allow students to get analytic data. We offer them personalized support, personalized feedback, through another project. And this unit is also very tightly connected with the learning and teaching systems that is part of the Chief Operation Officer. So again, very direct reporting lines to try to achieve impact in here. And to conclude, after spending a few days here, I'd like to give you a bit of a glimpse of the Ogata Lab, where Ogata Lab is sitting. This is the box that I call here Learning and Education Technology Research Lab. And it's a very similar structure. In your case, you have the presidents, you have the faculties have dean have school or departments, and finally you have the academics here. You have a similar structure to support because you have central administration, inside is planning and information, and there is the information infrastructure division. This group over here is inside a center in this case, so it's a slightly different structure from the previous ones. And this center is ACCMS. This group over here is doing mostly research, and it relies on other structures to see if whatever that research showing as powerful can be deployed at scale, and as I've learned these days, deploy even outside of Kyoto University all over the world. So this gives you a flavor of the 2 or 3 type of options out there, of the main research departments we have identified from the Society of Learning Analytics, and how institutions are articulating these structures. The common theme for all of them, Very important. Number one, these groups are multidisciplinary. You need to put together some structure that is conducive to dialogue. When someone wants to deploy a learning analytics initiative, it has to have direct communication with the business intelligence group or with the learning management system deployment. It has to have direct communication with the academics. This is very difficult to achieve. It has to have direct communication with leadership, because at some point you're going to need a data management governance or policy. All these things have to happen in the context of your team. So this is the point where all over the world we are struggling. The second part is that the institutions have to convey this strategic vision. Whenever you approach your chief data officer about using the right data to provide learning analytics initiative, he has to have a clear vision saying, yes, I need to support you with this initiative because it's part of our strategy. If it is not in the strategy, that person probably will say, no, I have some other things to do that are much more important. I don't see the point for me supporting you. And this is when things start to break down. And the final one, this is a third one that a lot of institutions are struggling with. How do we make this transition from research to adoption? But this is not intrinsically anything special about learning analytics. This is how research works, right? How do we transform research into deployment or research into development and let that development guide additional research? This is the typical conundrum that all of us or all the institutions are struggling with. It is also part of this context. Learning analytics has a very strong research component, but it takes a long to transform that research into impact. So that's it. I'd like to conclude my talk reminding you of these main 4 points that we have covered today. First, hopefully I convey to you the notion that the field of learning analytics is advancing. It's advancing very strongly. Not only we have structures like the Society of Learning Analytics, SOLAR, but we also have these events that are happening and gather a lot of interest and a lot of attendees from, in this case, it's Japan, but it happens the same in other countries. So this is a field that is now crystallizing and becoming very exciting and very powerful. The second one is, remember, one way of potentially characterizing the initiatives in an institution is through these layers, macro, meso, and micro. We started addressing student retention at the beginning, but the field is much more than that. The field now can reach students in many different ways. We can even use data to support the students through their journey to acquire the competencies for a professional career. Those are the type of initiatives that we need to explore more in depth. We also need to focus on the need to produce evidence at each stage. And I think this is a bit of a challenge, but at the same time it's something we need to come to terms with. Whenever we talk to the leadership roles in an institution, we have to be able to make a compelling value proposition why we're using learning analytics. And it has to be based in evidence. And the final point is the need to create these structures. And these structures are tricky. These structures are somewhat against the conventional division of roles in an institutional education. What we are seeing from the point of view of the society is that the institutions that want to embrace this paradigm, they end up creating structures that are multidisciplinary. They even have, for example, the Michigan structure has some academics in residence. And therefore, this is the type of relationship that guarantees that you're getting the feedback from your community of users. That's it. Thank you very much for your time, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.